Welcome to Operation History. If you're new here, subscribe now because today's story reveals one of the greatest miscalculations in military history. A moment when an empire believed it had won the war in a single morning, only to discover it had all. Awakened an enemy capable of replacing entire fleets faster than they could be sunk. December 7th, 1941. Pearl Harbor, Oahu, 7:55 a.m. The first bombs fall through low. Grey clouds and explode against Battleship Row with a concussion that rattles the harbor floor. Fuel oil ignites on the water's surface, rolling outward in black flames. Sailors dive from burning decks into water already slick with fire. Overhead, the whine of Nakajima B-5N torpedo bombers cuts through the morning air, their red Hinomaru roundels flashing as they bank for another run. From the bridge of the Akagi, far to the north, Vice Admiral Chuichi Nagumo listens to radio reports crackling in from the strike leaders. His gloved hands rest calmly on the rail. This moment is the culmination of years of planning. Pearl Harbor is in flames. American battleships are capsizing. And most importantly, the U.S. Pacific Fleet's strunking power appears crippled in a single morning. What Nagumo does not know, what no one in the Imperial Japanese Navy can yet see, is that the ships burning in the harbor are not the heart of American naval power anymore. The carriers Enterprise, Lexington, Saratoga are not there. Still, in Tokyo, the news is received as a triumph bordering on the unbelievable. Admirals gather beneath maps pinned with red flags and string lines stretching across the Pacific. The American fleet, they believe, has been shattered. Even if the United States chooses to fight on, Japan's planners assume recovery will be slow. Painfully slow. They have done the math. An aircraft carrier, after all, is not a destroyer or a submarine. It takes years to design, lay down, and commission. It requires skilled shipyard labor, vast quantities of steel, engines of precision engineering, and most critically trained air crews. Japan's naval doctrine rests on this assumption that carriers are rare, irreplaceable weapons. Lose one and the loss echoes for years. And early 1940 seems to confirm it. In May, the Battle of the Coral Sea ends with the Japanese carrier Shro at the bottom and Shikoku damaged. But the Americans lose Lexington, one of their precious few fleet carriers, a month later at Midway for Japanese carriers Akagi. Kaga, Sryu, and here you are annihilated in a single day. Smoke pours from flight decks. Bombs detonate among armed and fueled aircraft. Elite aviators, the cream of Japan's naval air arm, vanish beneath the waves. Yet even in defeat, Japanese officers cling to a belief: America cannot replace losses like these quickly. They underestimate the enemy. By August 1942, the Americans land on Guadalcanal. The name becomes a curse whispered in wardrooms and mess halls. Night after night, destroyers clash in pitch darkness, cruisers burn at point-blank range. Carriers strike and withdraw like ghosts beyond the horizon. The Japanese sink Yorktown at Midway. They damage Enterprise. They believe each hit matters. Each carrier disabled, pushing the Americans further from offensive capability. In October, when the carrier Hornet is battered into a drifting wreck and finally abandoned after the Battle of the Santa Cruz Islands, Japanese pilots radio home with confidence. Another American flat-top gone. Surely now the United States must pause. Surely now the industrial limits of a peacetime Navy turned wartime force will assert themselves. In staff rooms across the Japanese Empire, officers draw up estimates. Best case scenario, the Americans can field maybe one or two new fleet carriers by late 1944, perhaps 1945. Their shipyards were not built for war on this scale. Their crews lack experience. Their pilots are green. This belief becomes doctrine. It shapes decisions, fatal ones. While Japan strains to repair damaged carriers and husband its dwindling pool of veteran pilots, something else is happening half a world away. Along the eastern seaboard of the United States, in places like Newport News, Norfolk, and Brooklyn, floodlights blaze through the night. Welding arcs flare like artificial lightning. Whole sections slide into place with mechanical precision. Men who have never seen the Pacific work 12-hour shifts, 7 days a week. They are not repairing carriers. They are building them dozens at a time. The first reports reach Japanese intelligence officers in late 1942. Vague, incomplete. Mentions of a new American carrier class larger, faster, armored. The name appears in intercepted communications and blurred reconnaissance photos. Essex, at first. It barely registers. One ship, perhaps two. Nothing that changes the balance of power. But by early 1943, the trickle becomes a flood. New American carrier task forces begin appearing on Japanese situation maps due many, too soon. Each one looks disturbingly similar. Long flight decks, massive air groups. And most unsettling of all, there seems to be no end to them. For the men who planned Pearl Harbor, the realization is slow, dawning and terrifying. They did not cripple American industry. They awakened it. January 15, 1943. Naval General Staff Headquarters, Tokyo. Captain Sadatoshi Tomioka stands rigidly at the edge of a long lacquer table, a stack of translated intelligence summaries, clenched in his hands. The room smells faintly of ink and cigarette smoke. Maps of the Pacific dominate the wall's vast blue expanses punctured by island chains, red pins marking Japanese garrisons, and small American flags that seem to multiply with each passing month. Tomioka clears his throat. New U.S. carrier commissionings confirmed. He says carefully, USS Essex operational, Yorktown and New Hull, same name fitting out, Intrepid, Bunker Hill, Hornet, more to follow. A murmur ripples through the room. Vice Admiral Shigeru Fukudome leans forward, fingers steepled. How many? He asks. Tomioka hesitates. Our estimate, 12 to 14 fleet carriers by the end of 1944. The silence that follows is heavy, oppressive. Someone exhales sharply. Another officer mutters that the number must be exaggerated American propaganda. Perhaps. But no one laughs. The Americans have not behaved like a nation bluffing. These are not the fragile conversions Japan relied upon early in the war. The Essex-class carriers are purpose-built weapons longer than any Japanese carrier afloat, armored against bomb hits, bristling with radar arrays and anti-aircraft guns. They can steam at over 30 knots, keep pace with fast battleships, and launch air groups larger than anything Japan can field. And they are arriving fully. Formed crew trained, air wings assigned, logistics already in place. By the spring of 1943, the first Essex-class carriers enter combat operations. Japanese submarine commanders report encountering task forces with unfamiliar silhouettes. Pilots returning from reconnaissance missions describe flight decks that seem impossibly long, packed with aircraft lined wingtip to wingtip. One pilot, Lieutenant Junior Grade Hiroshi Sakamoto, lands his Zero on the battered deck of Zuikoku after a scouting mission north of the Solomons. His face is pale beneath his flight helmet. They had 3 carriers, he tells his squadron leader. All new. Identical. And more ships beyond. Them screens thicker than anything I've seen. The realization begins to spread through the fleet. This is not replacement. This is multiplication. While Japan struggles to rebuild from midway scraping together air groups. With hastily trained pilots and patchwork maintenance, the United States is rotating entire carrier. Task forces. One group strikes the Gilberts. Another refuels and rearms. A third prepares for the Marshalls. When one carrier takes damage, it withdraws not out of the war, but out of the line, replaced within weeks by another hull fresh from a shipyard. Japanese doctrine had assumed a war of attrition, favoring the defender. Instead, attrition is accelerating and only one side can afford it. Nowhere is this imbalance clearer than in the air. Before the war, Japan's naval aviators were elite trained for years, honed through punishing exercises. Losses at Coral Sea and Midway had been grievous, but the leadership believed quality could compensate for quantity. By mid-1943, that belief is collapsing. American pilots arrive in squadrons of dozens, trained under standardized programs, flying aircraft that are improving with every month. The F-6F Hellcat replaces the Wildcat faster, tougher, forgiving of mistakes. Dive bombers and torpedo planes coordinate attacks with a precision born, not of individual brilliance, but of repetition and doctrine. Japanese pilots, by contrast, are flying longer missions with less fuel, fewer spare parts, and declining experience levels. Veteran instructors are dead. Training hours are cut. New pilots are rushed to the front with barely enough time to land on a carrier deck, let alone fight aboard the carrier Shikoku. A senior air officer watches young pilots strap into their Zeros before a mission. Some hands tremble. Some faces are barely old enough to shave. He knows many will not return, and still the Americans keep coming. By November 1943, Essex-class carriers formed the backbone of Task Force 58. Their decks thunder with launch cycles measured not in hours, but in minutes. Radar-guided fighter direction intercepts Japanese raids before they reach striking distance. Anti-aircraft fire fills the sky with steel. Japanese officers begin using a new phrase in after-action reports. American Shiki-Keiji are sent to American-style industrial warfare. It is not meant as praise. It is an admission of helplessness. For every American carrier sunk or damaged, another appears, sometimes bearing the same name. As if to mock the effort, the loss of Yorktown at Midway is answered by a new Yorktown within a year. The sinking of Hornet is followed by another Hornet, launching aircraft into combat while the memory of the old one is still fresh. To Japanese planners, this defies the logic of war as they understand it. They had counted ships. They had not counted factories. June 19, 1944. Philippine Sea, west of Saipan. Early morning. The ocean is calm, a flat sheet of blue stretching to the horizon. On the flight deck of the carrier Tay, heat shimmers above the planks as engines roar to life. Deck crew sprint. Signal flags snapping in the wind. One by one, Mitsubishi A6 and Zeros and Yokosuka D for wide-dive bombers roll forward, throttles opening, tails lifting as they surge into the sky. For the young men in the cockpits, this is their first major fleet action. For many, it will be their last. Rear Admiral Jisuba Ozawa watches from the bridge, binoculars pressed to his eyes. This is it, the decisive battle Japanese planners have been waiting for. The Americans are advancing through the Marianas. If their carriers can be destroyed here, the war's momentum might still be reversed. What Ozawa cannot see, what he cannot fully grasp, is the scale of what he is facing. Over the eastern horizon, beyond the curvature of the Earth, lies Task Force 58. 15 fleet and light carriers, more than 900 aircraft, layered radar coverage, fighter direction officers tracking every Japanese launch the moment wheels leave the deck. As the first Japanese strike forms up, American radar operators already have them plotted bearing. Altitude, speed. Orders ripple across carrier bridges, fighters scramble. Hellcats rise in swarms. The air battle that follows becomes known to history as the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. But from the Japanese side, there is nothing flippant about it. It is slaughter. In the sky, inexperienced Japanese pilots struggle to maintain formation. Radio discipline breaks down. Fuel gauges drop faster than expected. Then the Americans arrive diving out of the sun. Guns blazing. Zeros burn. Bombers spiral into the sea. Parachutes blossom briefly before vanishing. Among the waves, on Tay, flight crews wait anxiously for returning aircraft. Minutes pass, then hours. The deck remains eerily empty. By midday, Ozawa knows the truth. Hundreds of pilots are gone, many of them irreplaceable, not because they were elite, but because there is no one left to replace them at all. This is the cost of industrial war. The United States can afford to lose aircraft and pilots because its training pipeline never stops. New carriers mean new decks to train on. New squadrons rotate through combat, gain experience, and rotate out. Pilots shot down are replaced by others with hundreds of training hours and standardized combat. Doctrine. Japan has no such depth. Its training program, once the pride of the Navy, has been gutted by necessity. Fuel shortages slash flight hours. Carrier landings, already dangerous, are practiced less and less. Training carriers are diverted to combat or sunk outright. What was once a years-long processes, compressed into months, and it shows. By 1944, American intelligence reports note a sharp decline in Japanese air effectiveness. Attacks come in piecemeal. Coordination is poor. Torpedoes are dropped too far out. Dive bombers release early or miss entirely. The carriers themselves fare no better. When the submarine albacore punches a single torpedo into Thai's side, the damage is initially contained. But poor damage control procedures and other casualty of rushed training allow aviation fuel vapors to spread unchecked. Hours later, a massive internal explosion rips the carrier apart. Another modern Japanese fleet carrier gone. The Americans barely notice. Task Force 58 continues. Operations with minimal disruption. Even losses barely register against the sheer number of hulls available. An Essex-class carrier hit by a bomb withdraws, is repaired and returns to action within months, sometimes weeks, for Japanese officers watching from afar. The pattern is undeniable and demoralizing. This is not a duel of fleets. It is a contest between a finite pool of men and machines and an enemy that produces both faster than they can be destroyed. After the Philippine Sea, the Imperial Japanese Navy is effectively broken as an offensive force. It still has ships, it still has brave men, but it no longer has the ability to contest the skies over the Pacific and looming on the horizon are more American carriers' new Essex hulls sliding down ways, their names barely memorized before they are already operational. By late 1944, Japanese planners no longer speak of victory, they speak of delay. October 24, 1944. Inland Sea, Japan, dusk. The sun sinks low over the water, turning the inland sea copper and red. At anchor, battleships and carriers sit in uneasy silence. Crews move quietly along decks, voices hushed, as if speaking too loudly might summon fate itself. In a small wardroom aboard the supercarrier, Zuikoku, the last survivor of the Pearl Harbor Strike Force senior officers, gather around a chart. Table. The Philippines are marked in grease pencil. Light Gulf. The Americans are landing there now. Vice Admiral Takeo Kurita's plan is audacious, desperate, and born of necessity. Japan no longer has the air power to challenge the Americans directly. Instead, the carriers, what few remain, will be used as bait. They will draw the American fast carriers north, away from light, leaving Kurita's battleships a chance to strike the invasion fleet. Everyone in the room understands what that means. The carriers are already lost. What shocks even the most hardened officers is how casually the Americans accept the challenge. When U.S. reconnaissance reports Japanese carrier forces moving north, Admiral William Halsey does not hesitate. He brings the full weight of Task Force 38 Essex after Essex charging north at flank speed. From Japanese observation posts, the sight is staggering. Carrier decks stretch to the horizon. Aircraft cycle continuously launch, land, refuel, rearm. There is no pause, no sense of exhaustion. It is as if the Americans have discovered a way to manufacture time itself. When American aircraft descend on Ozawa's decoy force off Cape Ingawo, the result is inevitable. Zuikoku is hit repeatedly. Fires race across the deck. Anti-aircraft guns fire until barrels glow red-hot. Pilots attempt to launch with half-trained crews, knowing the odds are hopeless. At 14 p.m., the order comes to abandon ship as the last of Pearl Harbor's carriers slips beneath the waves. Officers watch in silence. This is not merely the loss of a ship. It is the end of an era, the final confirmation that the war they prepared for no longer exists. Across the Pacific, American shipyards are already delivering the next wave. By the end of 1944, the U.S. Navy fields more than 20 Essex-class carriers, supported by light carriers and escort carriers in numbers Japan can scarcely comprehend. Entire task forces are rotated for rest while others fight on, ensuring constant pressure across thousands of miles of ocean. Japanese intelligence intercepts shipping reports that defy belief. One carrier commissioned in the spring is participating in combat by summer. Another takes damage, disappears from the front, and returns before its absence is even noted. An Imperial Navy officer writes in his diary, "We are no longer fighting ships. We are fighting a nation's capacity to build." By 1945, Japan's carrier force exists mostly on paper. Fuel shortages keep ships tied to docks. Pilots train on wooden mock-ups instead of moving decks. Radar is scarce. Spare parts are cannibalized from wrecks. Meanwhile, Essex-class carriers strike Iwo Jima, then Okinawa. Their aircraft pound airfields, ports, and factories with methodical precision. Kamikaze attacks claim ships and lives, but still the carriers keep coming. Damaged decks are patched. Air groups are replenished. New hulls replace old ones. The imbalance is complete. For the Japanese naval officers who once believed Pearl Harbor had bought them years to fortify, to negotiate, to force a settlement, the truth is now undeniable. They misjudged not American courage, they misjudged American capacity in the end. The shock was not that the United States replaced every carrier Japan sank. It was that the replacements arrived faster than Japan could even learn their names. In the end, the shock was not that the United States replaced every carrier Japan sank. It was that the replacements arrived faster than Japan could even learn their names. If you found this story valuable, take a moment to support the channel. Like the video, it helps more than you realize. Subscribe to Operation History for more deep dive narratives from the battlefields, shipyards, and command rooms of World War II. And share this story with anyone who believes wars are decided only by battles, because sometimes they're decided by factories. Your comments help shape future episodes. Thank you for watching.